All right, good evening, and welcome to this meeting of the Norfolk Select Board. It is Tuesday, September 17th at approximately 7 p.m. My name is Kevin Calcutt. I'm joined by my fellow board members, Chris Weeder and Cece Van Tyne. We're also joined by our town administrator, Blythe Robinson, and executive assistant, Judith Lizardi. As a reminder, this meeting is being audio and video recorded consistent with the open meeting laws of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. It will be rebroadcasted to NCTV's government cable channel, as well as uploaded to NCTV's YouTube channel. With that, please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. So standing room only tonight. Popular meeting. Blythe, would you mind taking us through the agenda?
Sure. For the first time tonight, we have a public comment period, followed by the Town Government Study Committee is here to talk about some articles they'd like to see to support for the fall special town meeting. For action items, we have a consideration of appointing Michael Brogan to the Zoning Board of Appeals, to consider updating the town's list of special municipal employees, to consider updating the town's public records policy and designating the police and fire chiefs as record access officers. Our discussion item tonight is to discuss traffic and safety related to the intersection of Everett and Pine Streets. There are 5 warrants to be approved. There are no minutes for approval tonight. I know. And at the end of the meeting, we have an executive session scheduled, after which we do not plan to come back into, only plan to come back into open session for the purposes of adjourning the meeting. No further business after that.
Very good, thank you. All right, so in our inaugural public comment period, we are going to invite anybody who would like to come up and sit with us at the table here. Share their thoughts about comments, concerns, initiatives, anything they'd like to talk about with a variable cap of 3 minutes. Just note that the board is unable to dialogue with you on this. It is purely meant for you to be able to raise a concern for possible follow-up at another date. With that, who would like to be the inaugural speaker? Mr. Rosenberg, I think it's only fair.
If I could add, just for Judith's sake, I'm sorry, I'll get the words out, and our minutes, if people could give their name and address as they speak. We'll start a sign-in sheet in the future, but that will help us make sure that we record everything accurately.
Good, thank you.
Hi, my name is David Rosenberg. I live at 123 North Street. During the September 3rd meeting, we talked about possibilities for enhancing citizen engagement in town government. That isn't on the agenda for this evening's meeting. From conversations with Blythe and Kevin, I said that I felt that we needed to pursue that, but not urgently. It was not. There were more time-critical things that could be taken care of now, but I certainly want to get back to that when we can. In that discussion that we had at the September 3rd meeting, we talked about how to possibly proceed, and we sort of agreed to focus on one committee at a time. In reflecting more on that, I think that focusing on a committee, or the town meeting, for example, has the disadvantage that it constrains possible solutions to be aligned with the current structure. And since I think that it is conceivable, at least, that solutions for increasing citizen engagement will cross the structure in some way, or not be confined to elements of the current structure. When we get back to that, I want to propose reconsidering that, and I'll propose something that does not constrain us to alignment with the current structure. I also want to report that I was able to find 4 people who are not Norfolk residents who volunteered to help as brainstorming facilitators, 2 of them as individuals and 1 as a group of 2 people working together. I found these through a professional society that I attend, so I'm hoping that when we get back to that subject, it'll be possible to have to talk to those people via Zoom or Skype or conference call or something, so we can get the benefit of their views on how we're proceeding. That concludes what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Well within the 3 minutes as well. Thank you very much, sir. And David, I must say as well that thank you so much for your efforts in helping to put all something like this together. I think that you are really a main driver behind getting this initiative pushed through, so thank you. Mr. Alex.
Visual age.
Uh-oh.
For years I've been trying to get police and fire station to be built where the Bremerlis property is. Bremerlis property has now come up for sale. It's 6.35 acres.
If you're not going to sit in front of the microphone.
Yeah, well, I ain't gonna be able to hear it either. I got this. We no longer need any more for the police. This is to scale. If we built a 300 by 100 building. You could see how this fits on here with all kinds of property left over. Land that we don't use, same property. This could be taken up by our open space. They could buy that land, which would kick the price of the land way down. This area of it, the land is about 10 to 12 foot high with beautiful gravel. That gravel could be brought over and stored in the area where we have the fence where the old fire station is. It's going to cost us a lot of money to relocate the old fire station. We would be saving that much money. We could end up selling that as valuable commercial property to offset the purchase of this other land. The septic system is about to fail over where the fire station is going to be built. This area over here is no problem at all. Nothing but gravel. It's actually so good that we could probably put a well in over there and utilize that as for filling the water wagons and irrigation. The rest of the property, this portion here, which is a large piece of land. We're talking 303 feet by 271. This piece of property is 1,032 feet on North Street. If we don't get in there and do something, a lot of houses could be put in there. A lot of big houses could be put in there. We only have an 8-inch water line running down there, and that water line is transite. So we're going to end up with problems if we don't jump in there first. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else this evening for public comment period? I'm seeing none, so let's move along to our next item tonight. The next item is the Town Government Study Committee presenting some of the articles recommended for fall special town meeting. Would somebody like to come join us up here? Mr. Smith, how are you doing, sir?
Good, how are you?
Very well, thank you.
We have our whole committee here tonight.
The entire committee. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming.
We have been rather busy the last few months. We've done our due diligence. We've done some homework on a lot of items, but we have two tonight that we'd like to present, and we have two more that we know are in the pipeline that we have endorsed. The first one we have is to clean up Article 6 of the town bylaws that have to do with contracts. Many of these provisions were done in 1936, and I think it's time to update it just a little bit. Mainly, what we are interested in particular is that generally Chapter 30B will apply to all contracts contract, the Uniform Procurement Act. We are eliminating Section 3 that talks about bid procedures that based on 1936, when things had to be brought in and put in under lock and key, because now bid procedures are much different. We would recommend that the performance bond requirement be raised from $2,000 to $10,000 on contracts, and that this can be waived for by certain awarding authorities. There are contracts we have in this town that are over $10,000 a year for various services that we necessarily wouldn't want to have a performance bond for. There are things that are done every year, maintenance contracts and that sort of thing. And the review of the contracts, Section 5, should be done by the finance director rather than the town accountant. Obviously, this was overlooked when we changed and merged all the departments into several departments into the finance director about 20 to 25 years ago. So that's our first article that we have in mind. The second one is to have a pay and classification study to recommend that the town have one. It's been 17 years since we've had such a study. It's recommended that it be done at least every 10 years. We realize this costs money, but it may be in effect over time. It's of value to the town more than the cost of the study itself in order to have things done. Obviously, with a new board and a new town administrator, we feel as a committee that this is the time to have such a study done. There's two other proposed warrant articles that we believe that's coming from the town clerk's office that we have endorsed at our last meeting. One of them is to put in a general severability clause in our town bylaws, which we don't have right now. We only have it for certain sections that were put in relatively recently. When I say recently, I mean the last 20 or 30 years. But for our old sections, if one part was declared invalid, the whole bylaw could go down the tubes. So it's rather important that we broaden the severability clause to include the entire bylaw. And then the fourth item is to have a codification process to go on with our bylaws, to hire someone to come in and do what 135 other towns have already done, and that is to review our bylaws as to form and to put them in a way that they are interactive with the townspeople. For example, if somebody wanted to look up a dog bylaw, they could type in dog bylaw, and that bylaw would come right up so that somebody could see it, as opposed to right now, it's in a PDF and you have to go through and look for it. And we believe this is part of having citizens involved in directly with the town government, and also would help with transparency. And that's what we've been up to.
Wow, that is quite a bit. And, you know, as thrilling as bylaw review probably is, it is important to make sure that we're not, you know, putting ourselves at risk in certain situations by not keeping these up to date. So we thank you and the committee very much for taking the time to do this and dedicating your time to be able to help the town. Thank you. Chris CC, does anybody have any questions, comments, concerns related to the articles or?
I don't at this time.
Not at this moment.
Good.
Oh,
Well, in
very
that
good.
case, sir, thank you so much. And thank you guys very much as well.
We now have 2 vacancies, so we want people to jump in.
Yep, quick plug for the
Okay.
Town Government Study Committee, 2 vacancies now available for those that are interested.
I'm sure there's a lot of people watching at home who, is there somewhere they can email? Facebook
We
or-
have, we're on the town, we're on the website.
There's a volunteer form on the website. They can send them to our office, call, drop it off, mail it, whatever was easiest for them. Love to hear from people.
Okay.
Good, thank you once again.
Thank you, Jonathan.
All right. Our next item this evening is to please consider appointing Michael Brogan to the Zoning Board of Appeals. Blythe, anything procedural or anything you'd like to cover before we get started?
This came up earlier in the year during the normal appointment process. At that time, the town was still involved in some litigation regarding property of this person. And the board chose, I think, as a 2-to-1 vote to not appoint then. That issue has been resolved with that property in late August, so it was requested to bring it back forward again. So that's why it's on the agenda. We have received probably at least 10 or 12 emails over the last couple days from people who we've shared those all with the board, so that you are aware of what people's interest was, and I'm assuming that's why we have some folks in the audience tonight.
Very good, thank you. Is Mr. Brogan here? Please, sir, come join us for a quick moment. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
We thought maybe we'd kick things off by just you giving us a brief outline about your interest in the ZBA and what you're looking to do.
I'm a resident of town. I've been a resident of town here for 48 years. I'm a building commissioner for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, as well as the state of Rhode Island. So I do zoning every day. I'm general manager of a municipal company that we supply inspectors to towns as a need basis. So I deal with it quite a bit. Have a good background in it, and I think would be beneficial to the town.
Very good.
Yep.
Chris, Cece, questions?
I think, as everyone knows, the zoning board is probably the busiest board in town. We deal twice a month, 40Bs, as well as a general meeting. Right now, we have 2 40Bs in front of us. We do not have any associate members at this time, and we're also maybe losing a potential full member who may move into Boston. The ZBA requires technical expertise. We deal with wells. We deal with stormwater. We deal with non-conforming lots. We deal with test pits. The gamut is incredible. The expertise needed on this board to represent the citizens of this town is very important. We have very few people with construction background. Devin Howe and myself are probably the only 2 members who work in the construction field or have been in the construction field. Devin is an engineer in training, and we may lose him, which would be a shame. So we need people with construction backgrounds. We need people who have zoning backgrounds. A lot of the zoning laws are very confusing. We have non-conforming lots, and then we have accessory buildings, which don't conform to our non-conforming lots. So you do need input from people who have understanding in this area and experience in this area. I think it's very important. We earlier this year, Karen Clark was very diligent in helping us in that we had an issue with a bylaw. The building commissioner said a bylaw was this date. Karen pushed it. We found that the bylaw was actually a different date. The board would have made a bad decision that could have affected us in the future. So we really need people who are willing to put the time in and the effort in to understand zoning, understand our zoning laws, understand the state zoning laws, and understand construction and building in general. I think it's very important. I think Mr. Brogan does bring those qualities to the board if he is appointed. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything you'd like to add, Cece?
So I've read any number of the correspondence that have come before the committee, and I'm always appreciative that people want to volunteer, right? You only have so many spare hours in your day. I only have so many. These folks only have so many. And a willingness to come and volunteer the limited hours that you have is, and I'm not blowing sunshine, but it's commendable, right? Like, you could do any number of things other than sit here and put yourself through this. But I have significant concerns about the level of acrimony that's been going on. And I am of the opinion that while I think that you have a great background, I think there's a lot of other people who have a great background who don't have the same sort of hotly contested issues currently still fulminating in terms of people's emotions regarding what's been going on. I think that I've seen a lot of evidence of maybe a temperament that I question if the ZBA needs right now. I think that you're absolutely right, Chris, that having folks who are involved in construction who have, I mean, you've so many years of experience in construction, but Chris has significant construction experience. There's another member with significant construction experience. There's other people who have, it's my understanding, come forward indicating an interest in being on the board as well. So it's not as though there's going to be this vacuum. And people can learn it, and people make mistakes. You're absolutely right. But we learn from the mistakes. I didn't have a career in municipal government, and here I sit making mistakes. But people are going to forgive me for my mistakes. They're nodding at me because they know I'll noogie them in the hallway after. So it's, I'm a no.
Well, I mean, there is no beating around the bush. Obviously, we heard from a lot of residents who have some concerns about your appointment. How would you address those concerns generally?
Overall, sir, I have done nothing wrong with this town. All I have done is defend my farm that my family has owned for 3 generations, okay? I'm sorry that a couple of neighbors don't like what we do. But the alternative to having that farm is having 400 apartments. Do you want that? Because that's a big chunk of land. I'm trying to, work with the town, keep the farm as it is, and go forward. I want to put interest into this town. I have a lot vested. I don't want to pack it up and go somewhere else. I want to put my time in here. And I think I have a lot of knowledge that can be utilized. So, I'm sorry that that's the hobby that we have and that's what we do, but we didn't break any rules. And I think it's taken 2 years to figure that out, that we didn't break any rules. We're back to where we started. So,
I just want to be really clear. I'm not suggesting that you did. I mean, I've got a family of people who with farms and horses, and I am making no judgment on the farm. My issue is with temperament and how people deal with neighbors and how they deal with conflict. And it's my perception, based on communications that I've read and heard, that perhaps how you deal with people, and maybe you're perceiving yourself as being attacked or your livelihood or your lifestyle being attacked, but how people deal with those conflicts in this instance suggests to me that this board, I'm not comfortable with the appointment. It has nothing to do with the farm itself. That's just my opinion. We are all entitled to ours, but here I sit with mine.
okay.
Anything you'd like to add?
You can tell me. I mean,
If it wasn't for the farm, I wouldn't even have to sit in this meeting. I would be appointed to the board. Honest to God, you all know that. If it wasn't for the farm, and I was a resident here 48 years, you would appoint me.
I would slightly disagree with that, and let me say why very quickly.
I'd
So
like
from
to
my
hear-
perspective, the charge of this appointing committee, or this board, is to be able to find people who will act impartially and fairly in any action that would come before the ZBA. That's the main driver. Technical experience, clearly you're loaded with that. This is all in your wheelhouse. Wholeheartedly understand that. But just from looking at some of the historical interactions that have occurred, whether it be factual, not factual, perception, not perception, this board has to decide if any issue were to come before you related to any resident in this town, would you be able to review it and act on it in a fair and unbiased manner? And do you feel that you would be able to do that?
Yeah, I have, yeah. I'm a building commissioner, yes. Yeah. I have no issue with that. I have no issue with that. Everyone's treated equally. And you can reach out to any one of the communities I work for. Everyone is treated equally. Okay? I've worked for this town. I've worked in this building department for years. Never had a conflict. Okay?
Okay. Anything else you'd like to add, CC?
No.
Chris?
Cece, you had mentioned there's other people. There is nobody else has come forward to apply for the ZBA associate positions.
Some point this afternoon, we did get 2 applications. I mentioned that to Chris, and I just had a chance to see CC just before the meeting. Not on the agenda tonight because they just came in and everyone was going to need a chance to review them. So
So all of a sudden tonight, 2 showed up.
late this afternoon.
I haven't seen them.
I can tell you the names. I know what the names are, but I haven't reviewed them. They just came in. People.
Okay. It might be
think-
nice that the ZBA chair knows who's applying. That's first of all.
Well, first-
Second of all, Mr. Brogan did never, in the last time we reviewed this, it was said that Mr. Brogan was suing the town of Norfolk. Mr. Brogan has never sued the town of Norfolk. He was protecting his rights as a landowner. So the last time we voted for this, I kept quiet because the vote was taken is that, well, he's suing the town, we're not going to have him.
No.
Yes, it was.
I don't think I ever said he was
Absol-
suing the town. I said
absolutely.
we were involved in
That is-
litigation.
He was
is the way that
involved
I
in a
put it.
suit. He was involved in a suit with the town. He's not involved with a suit with the town. And all the correspondence I've seen all comes from Seekonk Street. I have nobody else in town here who has made a letter or written comments with regard to Mr. Brogan. It is people who are unhappy with the decision of run and gun, a decision that a superior court stated that the ZBA decision would be upheld. An unbiased opinion by a 5-member board. They didn't like that. And yes, they don't like Mr. Brogan. Let's admit it. They don't like him.
It's obvious.
He couldn't do anything in this town, and they would like him anymore, except for leave. But whether you like somebody or not, because you don't like what they're doing on their piece of property, to me, does not allow us to say, he's not entitled to hold a position in town. Do we go through every applicant in town who wants to take a position and do a litmus test on them with regard to everything else in their career? No. And we have nobody else except for the people on Seekonk Street who are unhappy with run and gun. If the superior judge lived in Norfolk and he applied for the ZBA, would we say that, would they write the same letters? Would we say, nope, you can't join the board because we don't agree with you? We're looking for individuals who will be individuals. They'll give an individual opinion to a 5-member board with 2 alternates. It is a 5-member board. Mr. Brogan will not be making the decisions. I think we have to look at that. This is a 5-member board. We're looking for 5 individuals who live in town who are willing to dedicate their time to zoning issues and vote independently and fairly based on the facts. The zoning board is a semi-judicial board. We review it on facts, not on our personal feelings. We have to. That's our job. It is probably the hardest board in this town because it's all factual, and sometimes we vote the wrong way. Sometimes we have to tell somebody you can't do that, but we give them the reasons why, and it's all fact-based. Now I have a fellow on Shear Street who wants to put a pool in for his kids. He happens to be on a road that has a through road, so his frontage is on both sides. I've had to meet with him 3 times. And last Saturday I got to tell him, guess what? Your pool can go here. It can't go there. It can't be bigger. It can be like 16 by 20. I'm sorry. But that's what we have to do. And that's what we deliberate. That's what we discuss in ZBA meetings. That's our job. We don't get to look at every member and decide, do I like you tonight? God forbid, I might not even be on the ZBA if people took a test of whether they like me or don't like me. But you know what? I rule it based on the facts. And we study the facts, we look at them, we constantly review them, we try to find case law to support them or not to support them. That's the job of the ZBA. And anybody willing to put themselves out there in that 5-member board or 6-member or 7-member board, I think deserves the right to do it. And I can't say that 7 members on a street who are unhappy with a decision that affects this individual, who had to spend a lot of money to defend himself, and we, the taxpayers, had to spend a lot of money to defend something. It's easy to complain when you're not spending your own money. I haven't seen one application, other than the 2 you have that I haven't seen, of anybody on Seekonk Street asking to join the ZBA. And I even asked Karen Clark, would she join it back in May? Because I think she'd bring a lot of talents to the ZBA. She's tenacious, she's hardworking, she's thorough. It's easy to throw stones. Sit up here and do the job. I think Mr. Brogan can do that job, and I think he can do it independently, and I think he can do it within the group. Trust me, as chairman, he won't get away with anything. No one does. Not even me. Because there's 4 other sets of eyes looking at us. I don't think we can judge him based on the run and gun farm. It was a very difficult case. None of us witnessed when it went on there. And it goes far beyond this room. Jack Hathaway, Jim Lehan, Dave DeLuca, Bob Bullock. A lot of behind-the-scenes stuff went on that nobody in this room got to witness.
How is this bearing on the decision to have him join
Because
the ZBA?
it all had to do with run and gun. All the letters you have are from people who were unhappy with run and gun.
Understood.
The same set of people.
Understood.
So that's why I'm saying this.
Okay.
The decisions made for run and gun go far beyond what Mr. Brogan is here for. You're right. What does it have to do with ZBA? Has nothing. All the letters were written with regard to run and gun. These people were all involved in run and gun. And they all have legitimate stories, and they all have legitimate concerns. They don't like what he does over there. They do not like his farm. But he has a right to have that farm. He has enough acreage. We have laws and zoning laws that allow him to have a farm. He could raise cows on that farm if he wanted to. The only thing he couldn't raise on that farm is pigs, because we have a bylaw that prevents that.
Pigs are smelly.
Plain and simple. I think it's outrageous that 7 letters, 8 letters from residents of a street determine someone's fate who wants to volunteer to be impartial on a board in this town. I apologize that they don't like him. I'm sorry. I'm sorry they don't like the outcome of run and gun. None of us like the money spent on run and gun by the town. None of us. It probably should have been handled outside of the courts, but it couldn't get there. But I think it's a mistake. Like him or not. Someone accused me of hugging him in his yard. I've never hugged a man in my life. I know Mr. Brogan from the Zoning Board of Appeals. I know him from run and gun. I know him from being the mechanical inspector in town. That's how I know Mr. Brogan. And no other way. I've never had a cup of coffee with him. I've never had dinner with him. The only time I've been on his property is to inspect his barn. So I have no love fest with Mr. Brogan. But I look at the fact that he's technically capable of doing this job. And I think his years in this town and his commitment to this town makes him an eligible candidate. Not 9 letters from people who are unhappy with run and gun.
Mr. Chairman, all I'd like to add, and I just speak up so that you can hear me, not because I'm trying to be emphatic, although maybe you need to hug more.
I probably do.
That maybe would be,
My therapist just
we
told
could all
me
hug
that.
it up.
My therapist just
We
told me
could
that.
solve a lot of problems.
You didn't
I
get
get,
hugged enough.
I'm not a hugger, just I'm putting that out there. Pat, fist pump, pat me on the arm, no hugging. So I've gotten off topic. I absolutely appreciate what you're saying, and I appreciate what you're saying. I just want you to appreciate what I'm saying. I understand that the majority of the letters, I think there were some on fruit, but I get that they were all sort of impacting. I don't think that they were all necessarily on Seekonk, but my understanding is that they were sort of contiguous or within. They're not the only times I've heard about temperament as relates to Mr. Brogan, and certainly I'm related to people who have temperaments that other people disagree with, right? I get it. I don't know why you're laughing, but it's true, right? And I get that there are people who don't like me because of my temperament. but my temperament comes before me, right? And so when I read the letters, I sort of sift out the I'm angry because my side lost, and I read the polarization, and the polarization about things like a fence dispute, or what limbs I'm cutting down, or there's a sound study and I'm going to run a jackhammer, and these all speak to someone who's maybe angry and aggravated because people are threatening his farm. But it speaks to temperament. And so while I appreciate how emphatic you are, notwithstanding the fact that you guys have not hugged yet, it's my opinion based upon what I read in the letters other than the fact of the result of the lawsuit. It's a no for me.
From my position, as the longest sitting member on this board with an entire year of experience, my interactions with your case and everything that surrounded it has been fairly limited. Secondhand, mostly looking at the facts and just making judgment calls from that perspective. I eagerly look forward to the day where we could leverage your experience and your technical background to help build and grow and move our town forward. I just don't think that right now is the time, from my perspective.
Okay.
With that being said, I would take a motion to consider appointing Michael Brogan to the Zoning Board of Appeals.
Aye.
Looking for a motion.
Make a motion to appoint Michael Brogan to the Zoning Board of Appeals as an associate member for a one-year term.
Looking for a second.
Well, in order to vote on it, I need to second it, right? Second it.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Aye. The vote is 2-1. Mr. Brogan, thank you again for coming in. We do appreciate it, and I do hope that in the future we see the opportunity for you to be able to contribute more.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next up on our list this evening is to please consider updating the town's list of special municipal employees. Blythe, do we have some background?
We have some background. So a question came before the town clerk, I'd say a month or so ago, by a member of a Recreation Commission asking about whether or not that board was on the list of special municipal employees. She pulled out the list. It's the first one in your packet in tab 5. It dates from 1998. So we've gotten together, we've reviewed the law, and we are proposing that the board take 3 separate motions to update the list. As you may or may not know, special municipal employees is a section of state law that basically intersects with conflict of interest law and gives, if positions, not people by name, but positions have the status of special municipal employee, they can come before a different board. If they serve on another one, they can be a part-time employee and have a job outside of work or a second job, within the community. I'm covering it very broadly here. But clearly, we found that a lot has changed in the intervening 21 years. There are boards that the town doesn't have anymore, say a personnel board. There are new ones that have come about in those 21 years, and there are updates to the titles of some boards. So going with the same color coding theme that we used for appointments, we've scripted 3 motions, and so that you can go through and read all of the yellow, all the blue, all the green, and update this list. Carol Green is here with me. She and I spent a lot of time going back and forth about all of these, and I think it just really reflects how the changes in our town over that time. For example, back in the day, there were very part-time clerks who served boards. Those have, over those years, changed to full-time positions. They're not eligible to be a special anymore. There's no need for them to be. Some, like plumbing and electrical inspectors, are people who hold are electricians and plumbers in their daily work, and they do this part-time for the town. Town council is here because he's here for the executive session, but, you know, he may be able to provide some clarity if there's something I can't answer. That's why we approached it and why we're asking you to update it. And either Carol or I can probably answer questions you have about any specific ones.
Cece, questions?
No.
Chris?
Nope.
Looks like Carol's off the hook.
She may be. I'm disappointed you're making it that easy for her, though, I have to say.
Did you have anything you wanted to add, Carol?
Everything into the record.
So what we did was, I've scripted the three motions. All the yellows are the boards that we would, or positions we would remove. Green is all of the ones we would add, and blue are the ones we would update. So what I would say is if you start with whoever makes the motion on the adds, on all the removals is going to read everything in yellow in one motion. Same with blue, same with green, if that makes any sense.
All right, would somebody like to start by making a motion for the additions?
The additions or the removals first?
Removals.
Removals first.
Yeah.
Yellows.
I'll do the yellows.
Go for it.
So I'm going to move that the board vote to update the list of special municipal employees by removing from the list the following boards and positions: ADA Compliance Committee, Bylaw Study Committee, Cemetery Commission, Computer System Committee, Earth Removal Advisory Committee, Economic Development Committee, MBTA Advisory Board Rep, Mirror Lake Advisory Committee, Open Space Planning Committee, Permanent Building Committee, Permanent Building Committee Clerk, Personnel Board Clerk, Recycling/Solid Waste Committee, Sealer of Weights and Measures and Assistant, Tree Warden and Deputy Tree Warden, Water Commissioners, Zoning Bylaw Study Committee, Advisory Board Clerk, Animal Control Officer and Assistant, Assistant Town Clerk, Burial Agents, Conservation Agent, Conservation Commission Clerk, Corrections Advisory Committee, Town Council, Zoning Board of Appeals Clerk.
Second the motion?
Here a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Next up is for the additions in green. Chris, you want to do that one?
Sure. Move the board vote to update the list of special municipal employees by adding to the list the following boards and positions highlighted in green. B1 Zoning District Working Committee, Call Firefighters and Lieutenants, Community Preservation Committee, Emergency Management Director, Energy Committee, Insurance Advisory Committee, MBTA Advisory Board Representative, Mechanical Inspector, Norfolk Municipal Affordable Housing Trust, Public Safety Building Committee, Town Government Study Committee, Assistant Inspector of Wires, Assistant Fence Viewer, Assistant Inspector of Gas Fittings, Planning Board Associate, Assistant Plumbing Inspector, Tri-County School Committee.
Time.
I know, wow, you
Great. Got through that quick.
were quick.
I'll second that. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And I would move that the board vote to update the list of special municipal employees by updating the names and/or titles of committees and position as following highlighted in blue. The Advisory Board to the Advisory Committee, the Arts Council to the Cultural Council, the Call Firefighter EMT to the Call Fighter Fire EMT Paramedic, the Custodian of Veterans Graves to the Veterans Grave Officer, the Electrical Inspector and Deputy to the Inspector of Wires, the Gas Inspector to the Inspector of Gas Fittings, Health Agent and Sanitarian to the Board of Health Agent, Regional District School Committee to the King Philip School Committee, and Trustees of Public Library to the Library Trustee. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Thank you, Blythe, for making that as painless as possible with the
And
color
thank
coding.
you, thank you to Carol. She spent a lot of time working on this and getting it updated and thinking it through, so.
Thank you, Carol. All right, our next item tonight is to please consider updating the town's public records policy and designating the police and fire chiefs as records access officers.
So I'm going to turn most of this over to Anthony because he is currently our records access officer, and he's excellent. These are basically grammatical changes and updates that are just good housekeeping, and he's got some very good business reasons why we would want the police and fire chiefs to also be records access officers. So, Anthony.
Welcome, sir.
Hello, Anthony Turi, Assistant Town Clerk, North Street. So as you saw in your packets, I've got a redlined version of our current public records policy. The real biggest changes are adding the police and fire chief as record access officers. Basically, the public records law really leaves it open as to who a town designates as their records access officer. It defaults to the town clerk's office. The select board appointed me as a record access officer, so I'm the point of contact for people putting in a public records request. I've gotten maybe just a handful over the years of records requests for stuff for the police and fire department, but basically when I get that, I just send it to them and they're handling it. While public records law is applicable to them, they do have other constraints as far as what they can release, especially on the police side with active investigations, that kind of thing. I think from an efficiency standpoint, from a covering the town as far as releasing information that we shouldn't be releasing, that kind of thing, I think it really is in the town's best benefit to have them as the record access officer. If somebody needs to put in a public records request for a police report, they can contact the police department. The language, the response, all that is still the current public records law still applies, so they have to give a response within 10 days. The fees, that kind of thing, still apply. It's just they will be the contact people. I can't give any information about a public records request for the police or fire department. Unlike pretty much every other department in this building, I at least have, I work with them day to day. I can help advise people about how to do a public records request for, in the land use department or something like that. When it comes to police and fire records, I have to tell them to basically go down there and speak with them. I think it's a good policy to have them as the records access officers for those departments. Towns in Massachusetts have done this in a million different ways. Every town has somewhat of a different formula. In many of the towns that I've looked at, especially in the area, the police and fire chiefs are the appointed record access officers for their departments. So it kind of made sense that we would kind of follow suit. Also, I'm an assistant town clerk. I have very little sway or leverage in trying to make sure that the police and fire are fully cooperating with me on a records request. There have never been any issues, but I'm not a town administrator where I can order them to do, or I don't want to say order, but really get people to do something if they're going to be dragging their feet a little bit. This way, they're responsible. If they are not adhering to the law, they are the ones who the complaint will be against. That way, kind of leaves me out of it because I can't be responsible for how they're responding to things, because that's way beyond my abilities and knowledge. Most of the other changes are more grammatical to make the policy read a little bit better, clear up some language. I include some more information. The select board does not appoint the like King Philip records access officer, but I include that in our policy because, well, somebody might want to know that this might be their reference guide, and they want to know who to contact. Same thing with the public schools. Mm-hmm. They have a record access officer that handles their own requests. I just include that in here so to point people in the right direction. That's pretty much the synopsis of the changes. Any questions?
One is, who is the supervisor of records?
At the state, I believe it's Rebecca Murray.
Say again?
At the state?
No, it says if you don't get a response, you contact the supervisor of records.
That's a state position.
So you have to contact the state if you don't get it.
You appeal if you put in a public records request, yeah, and the town doesn't respond to you in 10 days, yeah, you appeal that to the state.
Appeal to the state, okay.
Yes.
And what do you, right now you said, when you get a police or a fire request for records?
Yep.
Do you tell the people to go see the police or fire, or do you actually submit it for them?
Part of what the law says is I have to forward the request along to the parties who would, or the custodian of records. So if I were to get one currently, I put it into my tracking program. I basically forward that email to the police or fire chief. And in most circumstances, they've been pretty good about sending me the information back directly, and then I can provide the response. There have been a couple circumstances, mainly relating to police investigations, where the police actually, Chief Stone, handled the entire response because it was going to be a complicated response due to investigations and that kind of thing. If part of the complication comes in that most things are a public record. If you want a police report, the easiest way to get it is not to do a public records request, it's to go down to the police station and request a police report. If it's more when you get into complicated requests, large requests, that coming to a record access officer who can keep track of it if there's multiple departments, that kind of thing. So no, currently I try to handle it as much in-house as possible. There have been a couple circumstances where the police and fire chiefs have basically taken the request and handled the entire response themselves.
Yeah, I mean, I looked at this, and to me, I asked why. I said, we have an individual who's extremely capable, doing a fantastic job.
Thank you.
You know, I firmly believe in the KISS system. Keep it simple, stupid. You do a good job, the requests come through you, you track them. People don't have to, you can help people with their request, as opposed to them sending a certified letter or an email to the police or fire who it may not be written properly, so therefore
Well,
they.
no, see, nothing changes. The request can be identical if it comes to me or if it goes to the police.
So they
chief.
can do either or?
No, as far as the actual formatting of a request,
Right.
there's no standard, there's not allowed to be a standard.
Right.
I actually think this method is simpler because it doesn't make much sense for somebody to contact the town clerk's office to get a fire inspection report. That's a circuitous route for doing this. The police and fire department are much better staffed and much better able to handle requests for their own documents. I don't know what documents the fire and police departments have. I don't know what records they generate, what is produced. I literally act blind when I get a request.
You're a
for that
single
stuff.
point. You're a single
Yes.
point in town for people. If they want a public record, they know to go to you,
Yes.
which I think is very nice. It doesn't require them to go down to Sharon Ave. It doesn't require them to go down
It still
Main
doesn't,
Street.
it's not a physical that you have to go there.
They have
can
to send an
still-
email or something.
Yep,
But they don't know how to
contact.
do it. So you're like a single point of contact
Yep.
in town hall. And I think that's a very nice feature. We have one person responsible for it, gets it done. He goes and does the tracking. Saves people a lot of
I
effort.
appreciate that.
And I think it's
And-
worked. What I've seen in the last many years that you've been doing it.
With that being said, in my expertise, I would recommend appointing the police and fire chief also as record access officers. I think, from my perspective, in the town clerk's office, handling records, I have enough to do with that. Being able to just say, no, you need a police fire report, here's the contact, here's the person you contact, you'll get a response in 10 days. It's not adding an extra step that they have to, that it's just a different person to call, send an email to. Looking at other towns and how they do this, most towns have the town administrator as the record access officer. That is the response I got when I mentioned that before. I just.
I have no
Takes
problem
a
changing.
turn.
We have a second
It's-
motion
I mean,
here?
It's all a matter of
Towns
what you
have
want me to get
literally
done.
Every department head as a record access officer. That's way overly complicated. I think this simplifies my workflow, and I think would allow for better responses in those kind of requests.
If I could add one thing, I get what you're saying, Chris. One area I think that's important to not lose sight of is that 10 days might seem like a long time, but it's actually not in our world. Anthony's job is not even full-time right now. So sometimes, especially where it's a complicated request, we need every moment of those 10 days to get that done and turned around, especially if it requires going through quite a volume of records to determine what can be released and what can't. So if we lose time with first it goes here, then it gets sent there, then it comes back, we may simply run afoul of law because we've run out of time to respond in time. And I'd rather have him helping people understand who they need to get to and go straight there and have the clock start then than lose any time with, he comes in and, and he's been off the afternoon before and it's sitting there waiting. I would say that's not the norm, but it could be a quite problem, and I don't want to see the town have any violations simply for that.
Are you 30 hours a week?
32.
32 hours a week?
Yeah.
Okay. What's normal town hall hours?
We're open
And what's a normal hours
Not-
for an employee? 40 or
uh,
36?
most are 40.
Okay.
Some are less, depends on the situation, but in this case, it's not. And so I just think it's really important. I mean, we would like to just give people the records if they request them without even feeling they need to make a public records request. That's going to, our goal over time. I think it's most communities. But when they are particularly difficult and time-consuming, and we've had some recently, we can't afford to be pushing emails even from one inbox to the other and waiting for people to see them and react.
I just think people have always been complimentary of Anthony, and I think it's a
Absolutely.
nice single source location, and I think it's worked. Why change something that's working? But that's just my opinion.
Of course.
And it's kind of as a continuation of that, I don't work on Fridays. I have noticed a tendency for requests to come in late Thursday evening or on Friday.
Oh, we didn't tell you?
Yeah. Which automatically we are then behind it one day for a lot of requests that come in that way.
And I wouldn't want Anthony to be responsible for something that the, fire chief had supposed to have done, or his staff, and him take the black mark for it, so. Or whoever's in his position.
Anthony, it says here that both chiefs are in agreement. Was that Deputy Chief Petrusik that you consulted with? Yep.
Yep. I had actually floated this idea, I want to say maybe over the summer. Chief Stone seemed to be supportive all the way. Chief Bushnell had a couple of questions, more contractual, that kind of stuff, than the actual being appointed. And then I reapproached it, I believe it was probably last week or the week before, and now there was no issues. And I'm always available to help both of those departments and anybody else as far as navigating the wonderful world of public records law and all that kind of stuff. So I'm not going anywhere.
Did you make changes to it after you spoke with Chief Bushnell?
No, actually, all of the changes have been done after.
So what questions did he have?
If I'm recalling his response, it was more concerning about giving work to the chief that's not explicitly written in the contract. I don't know nearly enough about contracts and how the chiefs are hired and that kind of thing, but I kind of feel like this should just
So it's
fall.
good that this gets done before the next chief's contract. It seems to be pretty important.
I originally had written Aaron in already, but Blythe advised that is a little premature, so.
That was my only question.
Anything else you'd like to add, Chris?
Nope, all set.
All right, with that said, I would like to make a motion that the town's public records policy be revised to designate the police chief and the fire chief as records access officers. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much, Anthony.
Thank you.
All right, the next item on our agenda this evening is to please discuss the traffic and safety related to the intersection of Everett and Pine Streets. Blythe, would you like to give us a little bit of background to tee it up?
Sure. This intersection has been a concern for a number of years for people who are going along Pine Street and 115 or attempting to turn right or left on it from Everett on either side. And there has been work done to Everett over the years. But recently we've experienced some very interesting traffic situations with games and people trying to navigate those particular times, and others. We've gotten some emails and pictures and videos from residents of the area expressing their concern. And so tonight what we've provided to you in the packet is a lot of background about number of accidents and speed data and so on from the police. Both the chief and the deputy are here to talk about it, as well as the DPW director, Bob McGee, and Barry, to bring all of their perspectives, and hopefully we're going to have a conversation about what people's concerns are, what the options are that have been floated, what the realities of some of those are, maybe some ideas that we have that we can start to explore. I don't expect we would make any decisions. It's basically an opening discussion. So I'll leave it at that. There are 4 of them are here, and I don't know if who from the public will want to maybe start the conversation if.
Right, so given the fact that this was initiated by the residents, I think it would make sense for us to start with having somebody from the residents, if you'd like to come up and give us a brief opening into the circle of concerns and what brought us to this point today.
If you
Peter, I'm
want
looking at
to.
you.
All right. Up here?
Sure, go right ahead. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing this to the table. I think over the years, I've been 58 Everett, Peter Schwalbe, Jennifer Schwalbe's here as well, some other Everett neighbors. I'm a better writer than I am speaker, so please forgive me on that front as well. Lived since 2015, we moved in, 58 Everett. We love the neighborhood, wonderful neighbors, beautiful town. Everett and 115 is very problematic, and we've noted that there's problems during stadium events. Clearly, the traffic issues that have been discussed in recent meetings, but there's a day-to-day traffic problem that we also witness as we live and drive to and from our homes, and it's speeds and confusion at the intersection. This is a heavily trafficked area, 115, not just by commuters, but by heavy semi-trucks, dump trucks, cement trucks as well. And it's on a hill. It's on an incline with a slight curve. And I believe, I don't have a radar, but I believe, especially going downhill, that cars probably hit 45, 50 plus easily. And I'm quite surprised that in the 4 years I've been here that there haven't been more serious accidents where people have, potentially been seriously injured. There have been, I think, 1 or 2 car flips. I looked at data over the last 10 years, 87 reported crashes, 40% of those at the Everett and 115 intersection. So to me, that's a pretty heavy weighting of incidents. And that area measured was from the Foxborough line to 1A. And so mass.info shows that most of the incidents are clustered right in that area. Not most, pardon me, 40% of the incidents measured. So on game days, traffic is slow on 115, and you've seen the weaving that happens there. But that happens on normal days too, where peak traffic, commuter traffic, and people are going at much higher speeds. So, people on Everett drive fast coming towards 115, sometimes overshoot the stop. I've seen some cars go through, they don't even stop, and they just go right left as another car's coming down. I've captured some videos for you as well that show people turning left onto Everett right in front of a downhill vehicle. So we're very concerned for our safety as residents using that intersection. We're concerned for the general safety of public cyclists, pedestrians who do come by that area on the weekends as well. And just really would ask that something would be done to slow the speed on 115 and at Everett, and B provide something that will give a little more clarity around when people are supposed to turn on and off this intersection, to avoid the games of chicken and the games of last minute turns, things like that. I think that a roundabout was discussed as a long-term potential solution through complete streets, but that looked like on the roadmap it was quite a ways away based on the ranking. So we don't know when a real fix is going to come to this place, and we'd like at least something considered that's interim until a real solution can be budgeted and implemented there. So.
Very good. Well, thank you. And, I will just say thank you as well for the correspondence that you had sent in. We had gotten a lot from many residents in the area, but the correspondence that you had sent in were very clearly outlined, citing resources, MLA format, citation numbers, and it was very well put together and very concise, and we really do appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, I do want to actually add one more important point in my mind is that the director of DPW has been very supportive of the problem there and has indeed called it a death trap a couple times, 115 in Everett. So I would wholeheartedly agree with that assessment of the intersection, regardless of, you know, death data at the intersection. I don't think we need to wait until people die to decide that it's an important intersection to address.
Very good. Thank you. And thank you for the segue. Perhaps it would make sense to invite our DPW director up here.
And
Oh, go right ahead. I'm sorry.
Forgot about the whole TV thing. I would have dressed up a little bit. I'm Anna McGrath. I live on Everett Street too, and thankfully I have a great neighbor who does a lot of homework. I'm a third grade teacher, and I have a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old, and my husband's away. So getting here, this is my first town hall meeting, so I'm doing a lot of learning and listening, but I wouldn't be here if I didn't feel like the intersection was really, really unsafe. You know, we have teenage drivers, 3 of them right next door that are about to get their license. Don't worry about them. You know, obviously my 2 daughters, Peter has 2. I think that's a day-to-day issue at the intersection, just figuring out who's going to go. There's a lot of confusion. I'm really just here to support any kind of changes we can make to at least try to make it safer. That's it.
Thank you very much. And you know, one of the key initiatives of this get-together was to have our content experts here to be able to provide whatever insight they could to get us to that place. So thank you very much. Go right ahead. Absolutely. Well, you do need a microphone, so if you'd like to stand up with that microphone, you're more than welcome to do that.
My name's Jennifer Schwalba. I'm also at 58 Everett. I am Peter's wife. But from my perspective, I just want to stress, we're not talking about a 4-door Corolla that might get in a crash with another one. We're talking about semi-trucks that are speeding down the hill that we here on a daily basis have to use a Jake brake in order to slow down. So that's our concern, is the type of vehicle that is speeding down 115, and then you have a residential street trying to cross. I do not even use the intersection anymore when I am driving my 6-year-old and my 4-year-old. I have seen too many near misses. And on September 10th, I think that was just last week, I was home, I heard the screech, I heard a crunch. I was down the stairs on my phone calling 911 because I knew where it was happening, and I was concerned. Luckily, I don't believe there was serious injuries. But there were also 2 neighbors out there immediately, and the police were there right away. I just want to give them kudos. They were there immediately. But we know how serious that intersection is, that we are out there because we're concerned what kind of crash just happened. And then I just had one other, just as a little plea. You also have my daughter's school bus takes a turn off of 115 to Everett, and then on the way back, turns back onto 115. So you have all types of vehicles, all types of traffic. So obviously it's very close to my heart. Anyone else back there?
Hi, I'm Stephanie Donovan at 66 Everett Street, my husband Emmett. So we are actually on the sort of Rentham side, right, of Everett Street, which means we have to turn left quite frequently coming down 115. We moved in 6 years ago. We've been rear-ended twice, turning left with our kids in the car, now 7 and 4, but our kids were younger. We have also been rear-ended at the light at 1A on 115. All heading into town. So it is a very dangerous intersection that we do have to go through every day. If you're ever driving by at 3 o'clock, we're the ones standing outside on that corner waiting for our daughter to get off of the school bus. It is terrifying. We have a 4-year-old who has to come with us and stand on that corner and watch as the trucks are flying by. It is terrifying. There is no other option unless we walk across the street and wait at a neighbor's house someplace else. So it's a scary thing that we have to deal with every single day. When the snow comes, we already know we're probably going to have our car in the shop again this year, because anytime the snow comes, there is a crash at that intersection, and twice it's been us.
Hi, I'm Betsy Whitney, and I'm at Valley Street, and every comment that has been made highlights how we have felt for the last, increasingly so, 38 years. And I know that whatever takes place at Everett changes not so good and changes for the good will affect Valley Street equally. We are a cut-through street. We are not fully residential, so large trucks, big trucks, scary trucks, fast trucks enter either at 115 or 1A. And let me tell you, they fly by. Through the years, I have only heard one comment that did not agree with that, and they just don't live at 26 Valley Street, but we do. And there are 30-mile-an-hour speed limit signs, which I cherish. Every now and then I go 30 miles an hour myself to see what it feels like, and it's way slower than the cars that whiz by. Anybody who drives by our red house sees a sign. I drew a turkey and I made a couple of little ones. And when I stand there and stare at people and give them dirty looks, and I get embarrassed that I might do it to somebody who's my best friend or something if they're going too fast. It is a street that just begs speed, make up for lost time. When you get to the end of Valley and you need to take a right, you're looking to see what's coming from the Everett point. 1A has had very serious and fatal accidents about the time my husband and I moved here at the end of 1981. I know there have been fatal accidents in the past at the end of Everett, and I know the police are doing everything they can. We don't have, they can't just sit there and catch people all the time. And I see the cruisers there, and it makes me feel really cared about, and I appreciate that. So I've been encouraged by the discussion of a roundabout, because that will slow people down, and by the time they hit the end of my street, hopefully it will make a really positive difference. But I see Valley and Everett as very, very vulnerable, and it has not improved through the years. So here we are, asking for whatever help we can possibly get, and thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Nathaniel Hunter. I'm a fairly new resident. Well, I guess I'm technically not a resident. I own a business on Hill Street, which is in between Valley and Everett. I really haven't been there long enough to firsthand deal with a lot of the problems that the local residents have been dealing with. But in general, I just want to throw my support out there that anything we can do to increase safety in the area really is beneficial.
Very nice, thank you.
Before,
Go ahead.
No. I wanted to say something too, but looks like he's going to talk.
Nope. He'll come up with the DPW. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. I was just going to say, sort of observational as a townsperson, as opposed to the experts. You really can't tell when you're driving the road, but it's part of my run. Like I run from center of town up 115 to 140, and then loop around and come, stop at the Dunkin' Donuts on Route 1, use their bathroom, buy some water, and come back again. And on that sidewalk, you can really tell how much faster they just, even just cars, like you'll just feel the force of the car. And I think you really can't tell or experience it until you've been, as the people have said, standing or walking, really how much, because it's so wide and nice shoulder and it's going downhill and all of the, whatever the reasons are, it's a cut through, how incredibly fast these cars, the amount of speed that they pick up. There's also quite a few fisher cats there, just as a side note, I've had to run away from. But to the point, like, I really think you can't tell until you've walked or run or stood there, or obviously listened to the accidents.
We'll try to focus on one danger at a time.
All right,
and then
we'll
work
talk
on
about
the
the
wildlife
Fisher cats.
situation.
He was there first. It's fine. I just ran away.
Would you like to come up?
I actually
your
like to
insight?
invite both the chief, the deputy chief, Barry, and Bob, because I think it's important to hear their perspectives, both between the chief and Deputy Carroll. Come on, guys. We can find another chair. They've got a lot of experience responding to accidents and traffic control out there, and DPW could bring some perspective for you about how recently that road was done and whether roundabouts, traffic lights, or something else are viable, and what it might take to get to those, or if there isn't something we can do that's simpler, more cost effective, in the short term before we get to a bigger solution. I think maybe approaching this in a slower pace, but at a hopefully a lower cost perspective that gets the same result might be a great place to start. I also had a chance to talk with Deputy Chief today, and he went through, you have in your packet data about speeds and about accident data. The accident data gets reported by the department to the state, and we're not exactly sure what they do with how they put it into a spreadsheet, but we count at Pine and Everett 14 accidents in the last 10 years. And I know Deputy Chief can be more specific, some of the accidents they put into what came up to be the 40% are ones that happened 50 feet down the road or so on. And so I don't mean to minimize at all people's concerns, because they're very real and they're very important. But I also want to make sure that we're being fair to the whole conversation to say maybe there haven't been quite as many as the state database made us think. So.
And I think, in full disclosure, again, we're going to talk about safety, and we're 100% behind whatever we can do to help. I think, not to steal any of the DPW's thunder, anybody, without any doubt, Pine Street's been the most heavily patrolled and radar enforced in town over the last 10 years. When I saw the DOT numbers on their website, the accident stats didn't jive with ours, so we sat today and pulled everything through. And again, I'm not trying to minimize any of the concerns, because we fully agree, with the speeds and everything. But I think what happened when we look at our numbers is the PIN numbers for 1A and 115 and Pine and Everett got reversed, because those numbers are the exact opposites of what we had. We have over the last 10 years, 32 accidents at 1A and 115, and we had, up until last week, 13 at Pine and Everett, and then we just had the one within the last week, which would be 14. So somehow that got skewed, I think, on the DOT database. So just in fairness, that's so why the numbers that you see that we sent you didn't quite match up with the DOT numbers. If that makes sense.
It does. So I think it'd be helpful to understand the perspective from the police department. You've had both, between the two of you, I don't even know how many years of experience that is. But
Are you
it's
asking for a number? I hope
no,
not.
I'm not. I wouldn't dare. But I think it's important to the conversation to know what you guys experience, what your concerns are, what you've tried to do about it, so everyone can understand that.
So I started working here in 1976. And that I can tell you that Pine Street 115 has been a heavily enforced traffic location since I started. And we do our best with as many people as we have. I hope everybody understands that part. Yes, there's been accidents. Those accidents have been at all of the locations. Old Coach in 115, they've been at Everett, they've been at Valley, and they've been at 1A and 115. And they've been in between that also. People have skidded off the road in other areas. It used to be when those bridge abutments were there, if anybody remembers those, they used to hit those because that was fairly narrow. So there was a lot of places, but that doesn't necessarily mean the accident was logged in at Pine and Everett. It would be in the area of, so that and I agree with Peter's facts were probably, they came from the DOT, so it could have been a pinpoint where the GPS is just given a general location, so that's what we thought today after looking at those stats. I can tell you that there have been a lot of citations written over the last 10 years, because we just went back 10 years. We could go back a lot longer, but we went back 10. So I recall way back when I was in high school, there was a fatal at Everett Street and Pine, way back. We had a fatal my first year on the job, but it was between Valley and 1A. And then, honestly, there was one other, it was a pedestrian, and that person lived a very, very long time after that. But we couldn't really tell that it was a fatal from him stepping off the curb, so. I don't recall, but you lived there, but we couldn't, I'm not sure that I could support that there were a lot of fatals on that street, so I would ask you to help me out on that, but we could go back and look in facts, but that's the only ones I can remember over those years, so. It's a heavily traveled road, and it is a public way. There's a lot of people that are going to travel. You have that huge development over on Route 1 that is going to draw traffic, certainly on game days, concert event days, soccer events, and just the mall, I want to call it a mall, the shopping plaza, or everything that's over there. There's so much over there now that never used to be there. It used to be just a car dealerships, so it was heavily traveled on Sundays and Saturdays when people were buying a car. But now it's a lot of things over there, so. And yeah, what we tried to do with Everett Street, I don't know if we're gonna go, how far you wanna go with this, but I don't wanna.
Please, keep going.
What we tried to do with Everett Street over the years, because of the stadium traffic, was I worked with Walpole, the Walpole Chiefs, and I talked about, because there's been several since I've been the chief, but we talked to them, and we got signs to be put at the end of both of those streets. And at the one event that you had so many cars coming down, for some reason, the Walpole end didn't get put down there. So we're working with that. I was actually with those chiefs today, so. There's a lot of things that we try to do, and I know that you will see officers sitting all up and down Pine Street at various times. If you call us and tell us that there's a specific time that speeding's worse, we'll do that. We'll go there during those times. But, we run a shift 7 to 3, 3 to 11, so there might be that little gap right around 3 that there might not be somebody right there. But we try very hard to get out there. They're out there at 5:30 in the morning doing traffic, so, it's one of those things. I can tell you from the 43-plus years that I've been on the job that I will tell you that when you listen to the truck go by, and I'm not saying that they never speed, but when you listen to the truck going by, it sounds like they're actually going faster than they actually are, because we put the radar gun up on the truck. You'll see that they're going fairly close to the speed limit. They may be a couple miles over, but fairly close. So I do want you to understand that. And we've had people, come on, let's go. We'll go stand on your street. We'll have stand there with a radar gun. That guy's speeding. We put the gun up. Oh. And so, not to say that they don't all, and I know we put a traffic count out, and we can show you, yeah, there are those spikes. Every once in a while, somebody will drive through at 50 or 55. I know they did. I could, having done radar there, I can't tell you how many times. I know that people do climb up, and every once in a while, there's that spike. Somebody's going too fast. That's the guy that gets pulled over. That's the guy that gets written a ticket. So we do try to take care of that, so.
What are the issues you guys see out there on a daily basis besides speed about the intersection itself? Is it the layout of it? Is it the hill? Is it the placement of the stop signs? Are there issues that you have, or
Well,
how people drive.
going back, in my experience, whenever we have anything going on 115, it's the commuting hours, say. And if there's a snowstorm, you all live there. So if there's a snowstorm going on, you'll see that the people coming down the hill have difficulty stopping. But I can tell you that there's a whole bunch of hills in Norfolk that it's the same thing going on. They have difficulty stopping. And if they're going up the hill, if for some reason they end up stopped for a second, they can't get going again. And that's where you are, because I've been stuck in that traffic, trying to get up the hill or go to help respond to an accident. You know, those are the way it is. I can tell you, my own driveway, I've had to back down the driveway and go back up. I know some of you have experienced that pleasure in certain streets or maybe in your own driveways. So that's one issue that goes on. What else?
I think maybe it's important to hear from Public Works about what the street was, when it was most recently, what was done to it, what the possible solutions could be. I think there's quite a range from simple to complex, and I think it's helpful if we all understand that. So I know Bob can go over that, and Barry's got a map up on the screen that you all received as a handout tonight. I think we have extra copies of.
Before I move on, can I ask one question quickly, Chief? So it sounds like from what you're framing and what you're identifying and talking through the history and everything that you've seen there, do you believe that another traffic or speed mitigation method is required for that intersection or that road, from your professional opinion? Or do you feel that the methods that have been put into place up until this point are the most effective that we could do?
Well, anything more that we do to that intersection or to that street is going to be an investment for the town that we would all have to decide at some point, how much do you want to spend? And I'm not a traffic expert, so, but I contribute in the ways that we can, but you might want it would be an engineering study or a traffic consultant. And that's who's going to tell you what should be done.
Okay.
And they can give you our best, but,
Yep. Okay.
So I would turn it over to Bob at this point to kind of walk us through that.
Well, Blythe mentioned a little bit of history, and I'll try to make this quick, but I believe it was just before 2008, the town had a TIP project approved, and it was at the tune of almost $7 million to improve Route 115 from the Foxborough town line up to Needham Street, just short of the center of town. Blythe asked me today, was there any consideration for that intersection? And as I did come on in 2008, it's a blur to me. I was just getting involved with the project under another director. And I think the only improvement that they did for that intersection, the only concern was they changed the grade a little bit going into Everett Street or coming out of Everett Street. So they must have not thought at that time it was worthy of a traffic light, a roundabout, or anything like that, and that's really all I can tell you about the history of that. I know that it's time to talk solutions. I feel it's a dangerous situation. I'm not a police officer. I don't have the stats and stuff like that, and I do agree, if I said death trap, I'd like to soften that a little bit, but it may have been, I just got wound up, but because I know it's an intersection that needs attention, and if it doesn't need it now, it's going to need some, because the town isn't getting any smaller, and there's just more traffic. Years and years ago, I remember when I was a kid, Everett Street just had a few cars going down. It was a country road, and now we've done some work out there with speed humps to try to mitigate the speed. The chiefs, we had us install four-way stop signs and stuff like that, but that's Everett Street. The real problem, I think what we're looking at, is the intersection there. And one of the things, the stats, and one more bit of testimony is that the stats will show you that there's this many accidents over 10 years. But, I got two teenagers, and and the best way I can communicate with them is not try to obey the driving laws, but drive like an athlete, because they're athletes. Because I know myself coming out of that intersection and from Everett Street heading into town, trying to take a left to go back up Route 115, it's two hands on the wheels. And because there's only been 13 accidents or 14 accidents in 10 years, I don't know how many near misses there must have been. It could have been thousands. I just don't know. And I don't want to really just get everybody excited because everything comes with a cost. There are other streets in this town that we can't afford to pave, make improvements and intersection improvements because we just don't have the money. So as we talk about solutions, and I'll move right into that, I'm going to turn this over to Barry because we have like three things that we've come up with, and I may add to what you see on the screen as he concludes.
Try to zoom in as tight as I can so everybody can get an idea of what we're talking about. Can everybody hear me? Good? Do I need a microphone? Let me introduce myself. I'm Barry LaRiviere. I'm the Assistant DPW Director for the town of Norfolk. So some of the issues we have with this intersection is we've talked about the vertical issues we have a slope. That really precludes us from trying to install a roundabout. There's certain standards we have to meet, Mass DOT, federal highway. Four-way intersection, a signalized intersection, the same thing. We have slope, we have other issues out there that kind of prohibits us what we can do based on federal highway and Mass DOT standards. So recently, out of everybody's noticed over on Rockwood and Boardman, we did some sight distance clearing on Boardman heading towards Millis. We have a stop sign that actually has a radar in it that signals a flashing beacon right in front of Gump's Playground. So one of the scenarios we're thinking about is we have the existing 35-mile-an-hour speed limit sign going up the hill. We could put the caution intersection ahead sign so it would flash speed limit, and it would be the same radar-activated stop sign. So when a car pulls in here that is proceeding to come out, the stop sign would send a radar signal to the indicators up here, letting traffic know that there's a vehicle ahead. It would also show the speed limits. The other solution we were possibly looking at would be a overhanging, flashing yellow beacon, similar to Main and Park, warning people that, hey, there's an intersection ahead, slow down. There's a couple other things. I'll expand the map a little bit to show that. So what we're looking at is, without getting into the roundabout, without getting into signals, we're talking studies, traffic counts. The town will be investing a significant amount of money to see if we can even put one of those methods there, and then we'd also have to look at funding that. Roundabout, we could be looking at $1 million. Same thing with a full signalized intersection, which probably wouldn't go because of the hill and the speeds that are there. We also might find, because I've actually experienced this with another community I worked in, where the residents were concerned about the speed. The hired engineering firm did a study and actually found out that the speed limit was too low, and they had to raise the speed limit because of traffic volume. So be careful what you wish for. We might be happy with the way the speed limit is right now. Let me zoom out the map a little bit, and I'll show you what we're thinking about next. So it might be a little tough to see, but another scenario we were talking about is actually redesigning the traffic patterns in here by putting one-ways and no truck routes. So the idea would be Everett Street would become a one-way from the intersection of Pine to Hill. It would then turn into a two-way from Hill to the Rentham town line, Walpole town line, with no through trucking. Traffic coming from Walpole would then go down Hill Street. Hill Street would be two-way. Valley Street would become a one-way from 1A to Pine Street. Now, this is just a scenario. Like I said, we're presenting options. With this options, we'd have to do some road work. We'd have to do some road winding. So this would be a significant investment as well. One of the things we were thinking about is the sight distance at Valley is a lot better at Everett. So now you're at the bottom of the hill. You're able to see the vehicles coming down, and then you'll be able to get out here. It would mean that the residents that live on this side of Everett Street would now be a one-way, and they'd have to go down and around. But you wouldn't have any vehicles going past your house. So this is an alternative, but it is going to come with a cost. Road widening, right-of-way issues, engineering. So it's probably not something that's in the foreseeable future. We were kind of looking at this signalized section, just like we have at Rockwood and Boardman. It's about a $25,000 installation process. Our thoughts is let's monitor and see what's going on at Rockwood and Boardman, see how that works, and see if that would be a viable solution for Everett and Pine Street.
Mary, do those speed notification signs, do they collect data? Or
Yes, they do. They're actually, when we installed it, Lieutenant Shannon was out there with us. He actually now has the capability to go to that whenever he wants and download the information and see it live. So we can collect speed information for the police department. So our thought is, let's see how Rockwood and Boardman works. Let's work with the police department to gather that information, see what we're getting, and see if it's a good application that we could try over here. And again, it's based on, like we hate to say it, but it's all based on available funding. So we have to see if we can pull the money together to be able to do that.
Go right ahead.
Can you just move the microphone, please? Oh, yeah.
Sorry, it's just a simple question. Are those speed signs are they the kind that you have the limit and then it blinks what the
Yeah,
person's
so
actually-
basically the existing speed limit sign would be posted, it's already up the hill. So it's telling the driver it's 35 miles an hour. After they get a certain distance, we have to figure that out. We have to look at truck braking and things like that. It'll then flash their existing speed limit. So that's always flashing. So the one at Gumps, it should be up and running this week. Every time a car goes by, it's going to flash your speed limit. So when a vehicle would proceed to move out of here, the stop sign would actually pick up a radar. Basically, it shoots the radar at the vehicle and then shoots it up. So above the speed limit sign will be a flashing intersection ahead sign. So it kind of alerts the drivers that there's something going on there. A couple studies I did read that everybody's kind of reverting back to that blinking yellow above intersections. That's a little bit more expensive solution, probably $50,000, $60,000 range, because now we have to put a pole in, hang a light, and look at it that way. But it'd be similar to that Park and Main. But my feeling is the problem with that is how many times you go down Main Street, you forget it's there. It's always been there. It's a blinking light. But it serves as a good caution, basic caution ahead device.
Just driving behind people, when they see they're speeding, you see them slow down.
Slow down.
We've seen the sign on.
Well, when we were setting it up, we're testing it, and Lieutenant Shannon and I were actually watching vehicles coming by, and as soon as they saw it, they were slowing down.
The blinking speed limit signs, are you looking at both uphill and downhill?
Right now, seems to be the issue would be the downhill. So I think our goal is similar to what we're doing at Rockwood and Boardman. We have it coming in from Millis, see how it works. If we have to, that's the nice thing about these systems, they're expandable. So we can put it on one side of the road, see how it works. If the money's available, we can actually do it on both sides of the road.
Okay. So, and those initiate when they detect motion or exceeding the speed limit?
Yep.
Yeah. So similar to what Jennifer mentioned, I see that as well. They put some test ones up like a few years ago on the downhill. It actually helped. You saw people slowing down when they got that feedback. When you go further on 115 where it's that static yellow light that just goes for on, nobody pays attention. They see it for a week, they slow down after that, they know it's there. There's no consequences to it.
Nope, not at all. But it's one of those things, it's kind of, how engineering world works, it's sometimes you go back to the tried and true. And that yellow beacon, what they found during studies, same thing like with the flashing stop signs. People will actually focus on the flashing stop sign and will actually miss the intersection. They'll forget to stop because they're looking at the flashing stop sign. So that, that constant yellow above it, even though you kind of drone it out, in your peripheral and your perception, it's actually still there. So you're picking that up. So it's kind of interesting.
Hi, our town planner, Rich McCarthy, had applied for a Smart Streets grant, and as I understood that was town had to do some preliminary planning or engineering for it, and then this grant would pay to implement it.
Well, it was a complete streets grant, and the caveat with that one is we have to have shovel-ready projects. All right, so they're looking for us to basically, we need to have a project designed. So we have to front the design, give it to the state, and they have to approve it. Now we're going against all the other cities and towns in Massachusetts, and it's only up to $400,000. So if we're looking at $1 million investment, let's say for a roundabout, We have to do the engineering. We have to do everything first, and then hopes that we get the money that would help us out for that project.
Just so I'm understanding, this is probably everyone assumes this, but by controlling the speed, then the assumption is that's going to help with the confusion of the intersection? Is that sort of the mindset?
I don't think it's the confusion. I think everybody can kind of testify. I think the idea is slowing down that speed,
Okay.
alerting the drivers that, hey, there's an intersection ahead, and these are the current speeds. Like I said, Rockwood and Boardman is our test case right now. If it works good over there, we'll be looking to apply it over here as well.
Thank you.
What's the time frame of the test case?
Well, I'm hoping 6 months, because we did do some sight distance clearing. That added to basically be able to see the vehicles. That's another issue we have over here pulling out of Everett. Your sight distance up the road isn't very good. We don't have a lot of right of way where we can get in there and actually cut down trees and move things like that. For Rockwood and Board, we were able to negotiate with a property owner and be able to make it happen over there.
I just wanted to say, I don't know if I'm.
Yeah, could you please use it for the...
School teacher in me, I know. I really, really appreciate this detailed discussion tonight. A lot of input, a lot of interest, a lot of enthusiasm to find answers from everybody who has participated. And it means a lot. It means a lot to me and my family and friends. And I think Everett and Valley have become brothers and sisters through this. For decades, I've picked up trash on Valley Street. Bob, I think you stopped and said, now you be careful, as did Eric. And I see most of my speeders as they're coming down Valley. I think that when that protrusion at the end of Valley Street was put in, that helped a lot. I myself pay attention, and let me tell you, I can get going and thinking about other things and not paying attention. I commuted to Sudbury every day, and I was usually thinking about how am I going to fit my reading groups in and do this and do that, and your mind wanders. Seeing the blinking stoplights, for some reason, I consider that to be effective. But are you saying, Barry, that the yellow light above, people just become immune to it?
Well,
and
it's kind of
blank
interesting.
it out?
There's some studies that are going back and forth on it, and they're actually kind of saying that it's proven to be more effective because it's not consciously, it's
Okay.
subconsciously
okay.
that you're triggering that yellow light means
Okay.
slow down, there's something ahead. So, I mean, it's kind of, I'd have to dig up the article again and really dig into it.
I don't know what comes next, but if there's a volunteer study group, I'd love to be on it, and I appreciate the care, and I talked with Blythe, was it this week or last week, for quite a long time about the speed on Valley Street. This means a lot, and I think solutions are problems in disguise, and that we can find some answers. So that's my sermonette for tonight.
Can't get away without me. Could I direct this to Chuck directly? I've been talking to him about speeding. I'm on North Street, but just short of here by a few hundred yards. Is it true that we only own one radar detector with the recorder?
We have the big trailer that we can put out. We also have a sign that we mount, and that's, I think somebody mentioned it. We can mount on a telephone pole or.
Right,
So we have
yeah,
two.
have two of them. I was trying to get one in front of my house, but they're just too busy, so I made one. And it did a hell of a job of slowing the traffic down. It's a fake one.
Don't get that
So could we go before town meetings, or wouldn't come out of your budget, where everybody is looking for those right now, and maybe get a couple more?
How much do you charge?
That's a secret.
Oh.
If I could, there's one more solution that hasn't been presented, actually just thinking about it now, and I'd like to try it out on the chief. What if we came down Everett Street from Walpole, and if we had to configure the intersection a little bit through construction, make it a no left-hand turn, so that you come out, you can almost go with the traffic. I see that as being safer than trying to judge two ways of traffic and taking a left going up towards the stadium.
Okay, and you can put the sign there, and then it's people's integrity is whether or not they're going to obey that sign, so.
Well, you can configure the
Yeah.
the intersection a little
Yeah.
bit for
That
you know,
helps.
all these solutions just are costing money, and so
Yeah.
if we're going to do something, we're going to be practical. The likelihood of seeing a roundabout at $1 million is
Yeah.
way down the street. To do
Or-
something right away, unless somebody else could chip in, so there'd be some inconvenience. It would kind of force traffic for a little economic development down,
Down towards
pushing
ours
down.
instead of theirs, right?
But you come down Everett Street, and you can't take a left to go up the hill. You take a right.
I just have an issue with that because I think what happened then, it was straight down through Everett. I just have an issue with that because I live on the other side of Everett Street.
Yeah.
And I just think the traffic would then go straight across the road, straight through there to get onto Route 1 over the other way. Rather than taking a left, it'll go straight through and just it'll decrease the hazard on our side of the road.
Barry, how much are those temporary signs that we've had? We own 2 of them. How much are those temporary ones that you put on a telephone pole?
I don't know, the chief, that's not.
Or they 10?
Do we know how much those are?
The lowest ones are about 4,000.
Okay, so they're less than 25,000, so why couldn't we get one for Valley Street, one for Everett Street, and 2 for Pine Street as temporaries? And do they record?
They do. The only issue with those is those have batteries, which we actually have to take the sign down, bring it in and recharge it every 10 days or so.
And it's just a flashing speed limit indicator, it's not really, so the idea of this is, it's like an intersection conflict warning system. So you're able to trigger that there's a vehicle ahead, which then triggers a sign. So it's not only recording the speed limit, showing your speed limit, but it's triggering, in case the one in front of Gumps, it says caution intersection ahead. It's blinking yellow, so then you know that there's a vehicle there. So it only blinks when there's a vehicle though. So, with the static speed limit signs, that's all you're getting is your speed limit. And I think, people are gonna, after a while, they're gonna say, well, there's no repercussions for me speeding, and I got this one here and this one here. They're just gotta ignore them anyway.
Well, they don't know it. And it's a temporary until we can do the $25,000 solution that
Well, we
gets,
have
and
to
we
s-
can always use these. I mean, we have plenty of roads in town. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 roads here that have major accidents. We can always utilize these at future dates.
I think we'd have to look at the budget and see whether we can find $16,000 to buy 4 of them.
The police will give it to us. They're a generous group.
I mean, when looking
Bake
for-
I've
sale.
heard that, but
Too, I
At least
mean, I
bake
think if
sale.
we're
Make
gonna
it
look
happen.
at several of these, we'd want to be looking at possibly the solar. Yeah, the solar ones have to get into going out every week and
Right.
pulling these in and.
Right. I mean, I think it's something
The vendor that
to
we use,
study.
Ocean State Signal, and there's another one now, it's Migma. They have some signalized stuff, but I think they do PD, speed limit stuff and everything, so I think it could be something we could all look at together.
Yeah.
It's something to get going,
Yeah, if
you
I
know,
understand-
instead we wait.
If I understand what Barry was talking about, though, what we're doing at Boardman and Rockwood is meant as an evaluation period to understand what the actual impact of implementing a system like that is. And we're not going to actually know that for how long?
I'd like to say give it a 6-month trial, so
Right.
you get a good baseline data. Because you guys have pre-existing data that you put out there that we can kind of compare it to and get an understanding of.
The problem with Boardman and Rockwood is it's a different animal, and I'm not a traffic guy, but from zoning board, Boardman and Rockwood is a lot of buses.
There's a big.
It's not, it's not the type of traffic we see on Everett and Pine.
Right.
So I think you're gonna get a much different skewed data with
Well,
what you see over there.
We're not going to be able to tell what type of vehicle. We're looking at speed.
But I'm
limits.
saying you got a different animal.
Well, it's a
you know-
it's a 4-way intersection.
Yeah, but you see big yellow buses. I stop. Every time I see a yellow bus at Boardman, I jam on my brakes to let all the
How
buses
much-
go.
But the other thing that we see a lot on a daily basis, and you guys know, it's the truck traffic coming, the concrete trucks, the asphalt trucks going down 115. I mean, just this week, You know, 115 looked like it was freshly paved from all the paving they were doing in Millis, trucking back through Norfolk. So I think it gets its fair share of traffic volume, vehicles, buses, and the whole 9 yards. And it's a similar type of intersection. It's that four-way intersection. Trying to pull out's an issue. I don't think we have as many accidents there, and you know, we don't have the hill there, but you know, we had sight distance issues there before that we're trying to rectify. So
Actually,
I think we can do a pretty good comparison between the two.
I mean, going back to the TIPS project that was in 2008, I think a lot of you will remember that Valley Street was reconfigured. It was made more of a perpendicular instead of like a Y. The same thing up where Pierce and Pine, where Pine turns left and goes to Route 1 to the Lafayette House. That was a Y, and there was no stop sign there, so they actually made it so you had to be a perpendicular stop. But Valley Street was a Y, and the stop sign that was there was more of a suggestion, not an actuality. So, and there were a lot of accidents back then before they made it into the perpendicular. So that was one thing. And if I go back even further, 1980, on the Town Hill, I don't know who was there then. Bernie, I know you were. We had the Town Hill, and there was a four-way stop. Well, that was our biggest accident location. We had 40 or 50 accidents a year, every single year at that one location. And when the hill was higher, before they built Country Crossing and before they took down the hill to put one of the additions to the library, they lowered the hill a certain amount. That hill was higher and people couldn't stop. And it's very similar to Pine Street where it's come down to that Everett Street intersection. So they had to take the hill down to make it more safer at Rockwood, Union, and Main Street. So that's just a similar. It was a four-way stop, but we talked about doing a four-way stop just because we were throwing everything at the wall to see what would stick. And the four-way stop at Pine and Everett is not going to work because of the hill. And we're not going to be able to take that hill down like we did in the center back in early 80, 81, something like that, when Country Crossing was built. So that's my thought about that. So.
What consideration would have to be done for the routing option? So Barry, was it Barry? Yep. He had a rerouting option here as well, and see that eliminates or reduces some of the conflict points at the intersection because you can't have people coming from the other direction crossing 115.
So the issue with the issue with the routing option is Bob contacted Norfolk County Engineering. So they basically assist the towns in Norfolk County with engineering plans and right-of-ways. We don't have an existing right-of-way for Everett Street, so we'd have to have an engineered plan for Everett Street that shows us the edge of pavement, our existing right-of-way. Hill Street, we'd have to take out the railroad abutments at there, probably do some widening. So there's a little bit more significant roadway cost. I think that's more of a long-term solution. You know, putting up the one-way signs and directing traffic, not a huge expense. It'd be all the other road work that would have to come with it.
So our goal tonight was really to have the conversation we've just been having, which is hearing everybody's concerns, talking about what we've experienced and what the possible options were. We didn't script this as a decision point, but if I had to put one forward, it would be to perhaps more enforcement, you know, as appropriate out there for now, and get the data from Rockwood and Boardman, and that gives us time to build into, say, the 21 budget, the cost of putting a full or partial solution there as we think is best available, if that's something the board, you know, thinks is important. And to not consider feasibility study, hiring an engineering firm to study the intersection and think about the other options that have come up. That those are likely expensive and, in our opinion, all traffic engineers, fairly unlikely.
Wholeheartedly agree. I think the only thing I would add to that is I'd like to see what the cost would be for solar panel speed readers in the interim for something that would be a potential short-term solution that could be reused in the other areas that Chris had suggested.
Yeah. We can get that. I don't have a problem with that at all.
Yeah.
We can at least get you the cost.
Yep. Yeah. Thank you. Cece, anything like to add?
Nope.
Chris?
All set.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody, for coming. Really do appreciate it. We hope that you're going to walk away from here at least identifying that everybody, I think, is aligned on some future steps that need to be taken and addressing the issue at hand. So thank you again. Gentlemen, thank you as well for coming in. Appreciate it.
Yes, thank you
Thank
to all,
Barry.
all the work to get here tonight. Thank you.
I don't understand why they're leaving. There's still more stuff.
Yeah, no, I wasn't here, but I remember it.
Stuff.
Yeah,
Kinda like town
I
meeting,
agree with you on
voted on the blah, 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 and now
the
we're gonna
railroad
go on.
abutments though on Pine Street, because that slowed everybody down. Because when you get to those railroad abutments on Pine Street by Everett,
Anybody?
you were
All right,
forced to
so
slow
in the
down. 'cause
interest
you-
of keeping
you
things moving
squeezed in there.
along.
I mean, I used to always worry about that. Yeah.
For those that are on their way
That
out,
was a slow
if
down
you
to
wouldn't
me.
mind,
I know,
please.
I used to go real slow because I used to
Still
say,
going on.
man, you're right on top of
Excuse
each
me.
other. But yeah, and then we took that out. We took that out, we made it a runway.
Thank you. It's okay.
Donna's got him in line.
Donna's like,
She's small, but she'll make it happen.
feisty.
There we go. All right, our next item tonight is to approve some warrants, and
your
it's
initials.
all me. I move to approve the warrant dated 8/30/2019 in the amount of $749,660.07. The one dated 9/3/2019 in the amount of $804,026.49. One dated 9/10/2019 in the amount of $4,100. One dated 9/10/2019 in the amount of $203,619.72. And one dated 9/10/2019 in the amount of $127,245.51. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Seeing as how we do not have any minutes to be approved, it appears that we will be next moving into executive session. Does anybody have anything else in open session? Chris?
Script? Do you get your little script?
Blythe? See if we can make one seamless transition.
That was a supportive laugh. I
Thank
have
you.
confidence in you chuckle.
I appreciate that. I would move that the board vote to enter into executive session under Massachusetts GL C30A, Section 21A3, to obtain advice of counsel and discuss strategy with respect to potential litigation regarding the construction of the police station, insofar as an open meeting may have detrimental effect on the litigation position of the public body. And further, to invite Town Council Peter Mello, Town Administrator Blythe Robinson, and Executive Assistant Judith Lazardi. The board will only reconvene into open session for the purpose of adjourning the meeting. I state that an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the litigation position of the public body. Polling individually for a roll call vote.
Aye.
Aye.
Kevin Calcutt, aye. And that is it. Is that correct?
It is.
We did it.
We'll just give